Good morning. How are we doing? Good. Before we begin, just a quick thing. I'd like to say thank you to all the organisers here at LeadDev who made this whole thing a reality, because without them, we wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be there. So nice round of applause, please, for all your guys. Cool. So myself and Ed are here today to talk to you about revolutionising engineer growth. It's something that we went on at ASOS. It was a journey over the course of a few years. Hopefully you can take some things away and look at doing that at your own company. So before we begin, this is me. I'm not going to read through all of that, but yeah, I've got 16 years experience mainly in testing, but also in engineering management as well.
Hi everyone, morning. My name's Ed. I'm an engineering manager at ASOS as well. My background's mostly more on the business side, so I was an agile delivery manager before embarking on an engineering manager role, which at ASOS is more focused on people management, a bit of delivery, but not sort of technical and engineering. And sort of quite a lot of coaching background in there as well. We start with some takeaways of today. So there's three sort of key messages we'd like you to go away with. Firstly, strategies for navigating effective conversations with engineers. So it's all sort of great if you've got good tools to use in terms of frameworks and matrices, but it's really important to set up managers and also engineers and other employees with the right tools and education to actually have those conversations. Secondly, around the frameworks themselves. So it's important to build sort of really effective tools and frameworks, and we'll talk about ways to define the actual competencies you're going to use and also how to categorize them so that it means people are growing and developing. And then lastly, understanding sort of an effective and engaging platform to actually use. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with sort of Excel matrices, which go down like a lead balloon with a lot of people. So we'll hopefully, with our experience, show you some sort of more engaging and interactive ways of using these frameworks.
Cool. So as Ed touched on, let's look at where we were. So this was around 5 or 6 years ago. We had 3 fairly well-developed competency frameworks. 2 of them in Excel. One of them was a nice PDF, which you can see there. The content was good. But there were challenges with Excel and even the PDFs, right? So we had different versions on local machines. No one really knew where to find them. Excels just aren't really very interactive. No matter what you do with them, they're not really that much fun to use. They don't necessarily drive the conversations that we wanted to be driving with our engineers. And we had feedback that things weren't quite working in terms of engineers, their careers, and their clarity. And the promotions process itself, which you'll see later on, was quite a convoluted process. It wasn't really that clear what an engineer needed to do in order to develop and grow their career.
Yeah, so as I mentioned a couple of times yesterday around employee satisfaction surveys, at ASOS we've conducted the same one for the last few years, and a recurring sort of low scorer was the question or the statement around, I have good opportunities to learn and grow at ASOS. And back in 2001, this was scoring fairly low against the benchmark and within the ASOS questions. And we felt it was really important, firstly, for engineers to feel like they have those opportunities. And as Kat mentioned yesterday in her talk about the culture of learning, but also sort of it was something that we thought we could control. Some of these sort of satisfaction survey answers or questions that don't really give you that too much control. So we thought we could actually go in and change some of this and give the engineers the chance to actually know what they needed to learn about in order to progress and be rewarded, but also feel like they're growing as an overall engineer. And just a few sort of comments that came back from those surveys as well. You can see a mixture of feedback from the thoughts about the format that we had at the time, what the level of support from managers was, and the clarity of direction, which sort of anecdotally told us that sort of it wasn't particularly popular at the time.
Cool. So we had all this feedback, and it would be ignorant of us not to listen to it. So we understood that people wanted to know where they could go, what they could do next. not necessarily in a vertical line, but also horizontally as well. We're big fans of the Amazing If podcast. If you're looking for new podcast series to listen to, give that a go. It very much talks about how you can grow your career, not necessarily in a vertical line, but also kind of squiggly careers, as they call it. And so what we did, we worked with almost every discipline within ASOS Tech. We spoke to the leads in those areas, understood what it meant to be a BA, understood what it meant to be a platform engineer, understand what it meant to be a data engineer, all of these things. And we started thinking about what are some logical moves that people could make from one career into another career. And we decided to visualize that in quite a nice little career path. I can't take credit for this, I'm not a UX person, but we worked with our UX team and this is what they came up with. But it wasn't just that, right? So we wanted to also highlight stories of people who'd gone from BA into other roles, customer care moving into BA, QA engineers moving into software engineer, because we felt it was very important to have that representation. It's a lot easier to do something if you're aware of someone else who's made that journey before you. So this really visualized that and provided the backing for it as well, so people could start thinking about what they could do next in their career. The career paths went well. They went very well, in fact. People liked them, the visual, they liked the stories, and the initial feedback was pretty positive. And like I said there, they focused on the what, not necessarily the how. So it was quite clear what people could be, what they could do, but it wasn't really clear how they could go about making that transition. And it was also that time when ASOS went through a period of change. Not just ASOS, the whole world, in fact, because COVID happens, people left, myself included, and it wasn't really showing the love that it deserved. One thing I've learned is that in order to really make change, to make improvements in the world, you have to have people that care about making that change. People that will put themselves out there and really drive things home.
Yeah, so one thing that we worked with the HR department and the L&D teams was to improve the training around sort of the career conversations. So I guess you're probably familiar with sort of different managers around in all different companies. They have, they might come from a sort of IC type of background and not have too much people management experience, where you might have an experienced person who's had sort of the full coaching qualification, for example. But sort of at the most basic level, it's important to be able to focus on sort of how do you initiate that conversation with your direct report. So like not every catch-up needs to be focused on career and objectives and development, but it's important to distinguish between the two. So we implemented these conversation starters, which was teaching with two versions, one for engineers and one for managers, on how to approach those conversations, how to plan them, what sort of tools and questions you can use, how sort of building an action plan, making sure you follow up, sort of similar to we're used to in most meetings where you give actions to people and you say when you're going to sort of need to be done by, and then you come back and meet again and sort of hopefully have sort of followed through on those. And then from a manager point of view, what sort of additional support that can they give the engineer? And next up was the promotion process, which Gareth mentioned before. So we worked with the HR team as well to actually produce a promotion process. And while it still looks fairly convoluted and difficult to actually achieve, lots of ifs and buts and yeses or nos, we felt it was important to actually make sure that people knew there was a process there and how to actually follow it, so that when they did go through all this development and growth and learning, that they were going to be rewarded with pay rises and promotions, which is obviously very important to a lot of people. So back then at the time, we had a different role for Agile Delivery Manager before the engineering manager came in at ASOS. The ADM role was almost a sort of a Scrum Master role. So you had the delivery management, but also the people management side of it. And I'm not sure how many people will be familiar with the experience of if you've got a dual role like that, the delivery management tends to be prioritized over the development of the engineers. And so that sort of pointed to the feedback that the engineers were saying about not too much focus and not enough sort of support, and managers didn't really know how to have those conversations. So at the time, ASOS shifted their focus slightly and introduced the engineering manager role instead of the ADM role, and took away that delivery management element. And the EM role was then really just there to support the engineers, increasing the level of engineering at ASOS and the experience that engineers have, and sort of driving culture and ways of working improvements for the engineers, which is a nice sort of almost luxury to have, but we've seen it sort of have really positive impacts on the feedback and the happiness of the engineers at ASOS. So at that point, that was when the EM role was created. And so we hired sort of 20, 25 EMs, and it was fairly rushed, if I'm honest. And sort of we got through, after the first year of being in the EM role, I had my end of year review, and my manager said to me, sort of, I know you've been doing a good job, but I don't really know how I can assess you or what good looks like in the role, because there was no competency framework for the EM role. There was a job spec at the start, but no one really knew what good looked like. So we sort of thought at that point we needed to create a competency framework for the engineering manager role itself at ASOS. So we embarked on a journey, if you can call it that, for that role, and we wanted to get a really good 360-degree view of the role and what it should be and what good looked like. So what we did first is we talked to 3 different companies who's all published articles or blog posts about sort of the EM role at their companies and how sort of the progress was made, what the competencies were like. And while they did have slightly different mixes of responsibilities in those roles, we learned a lot from all of them. I think Sally is here today. She was at Farewell at the time, and we learned a lot. But it wasn't exactly what the EM role at ASOS sort of entailed. So we knew we had to sort of start from scratch and build our own one from there.
Cool. So the great thing about starting from scratch is you have a complete blank canvas, right? You can do whatever you want, and providing you get the buy-in from stakeholders and everything else, you're good to go. So we decided to run a workshop. We involved a whole heap of people in this workshop. So we involved the engineers, who the engineer managers line managed, the heads of tech, who the engineer managers reported into, all the stakeholders that they interacted with on a regular basis, including people like the principals, the BAs, platform leads, or like the delivery leads that we have at ASOS. And we really wanted to look at 3 key areas. How should an engineering manager act? How should they think? And what do they do? And the great thing about this workshop was that we could lift and shift it for any role that we wanted to do in the future. And trust me, it came in handy because we started looking at a whole heap of different roles. And it was we just really got everyone's kind of put on posters what they expected of those different roles. It was a great way to kind of get that 360-degree view to really start looking at this is what good looks like for engineering managers. So we had this workshop, we had all these brilliant ideas on Post-its. The next step was start collating it all into something that's comprehensible, something that people can easily digest, and that's something that people can easily understand. So we took the workshop into consideration, we took job specs into consideration, we took all of the external 360-degree feedback, well, the 360-degree reviews that we did with other companies, and we built out Competency Framework version 1.0. You can see it up there. You might think it's a PowerPoint, and you're right, it is a PowerPoint. So we still kind of had issues around versioning. We still had issues around where the hell do I find this thing? But it was interactive. It was kind of easy enough to go through with your line manager and start moving that slider as to where you think you sit in that area, and then have those conversations. Have those conversations about how you can grow, how you can develop. So PowerPoint was okay. Like, it was visual, it was interactive, it drove some really constructive conversations with your line manager, but it still kind of wasn't what we wanted. It was still kind of all over the place in terms of where you can find it, different version. So we decided to think big. We quickly, as I should say, it was quite quickly, we built out a client Blazor web app, which meant it was interactive. It was hosted in Azure, which kind of ticked the box, okay, where do I find this thing? You quite easily go to that website and just start looking at it yourself. And And this was great. Like, this was really good. So the results were stored locally in your browser. Not ideal, but we'll cross that bridge later when we get to it. And word got around ASOS Tech, right? People saw this amazing tool and were like, I want that for my competency. So we spoke to one group, the software engineers. Unsurprisingly, they'd already started some work on this in GitHub. So they're creating markdown files for their competency framework, and they're kind of updating it, having the version control process around it as well, which was cool, but they really wanted that interactivity that we'd had. They wanted something that was level agnostic, so they went with the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition and really focused on the 5 areas of competency, so engineers can go in, score themselves, and then really start thinking about how I can develop. It's no longer how can I progress, it's how can I develop myself, and as a result of that, the promotion will hopefully come. So how it all works, right? So this has been over the course of around 2 years. It's something that I and others have done outside of our day job, so it has taken a bit of time, but we have this GitHub repo, which stores all of our competency data. So you might have seen on the previous slide, platform leads, business analysis, platform engineers, all of these competencies are stored in GitHub. They're stored as markdown files, which then get converted to JSON and uploaded to Azure file storage. And we've made our Blazor app server-side as well now, which is great because we had a system update that unfortunately wiped everyone's local storage. And as a result of that, it wiped everyone's competency scores, which was not ideal. And now ASOS Tech employees can come in, score themselves, save their scores centrally. We have this amazing tool that everyone can use.
Yeah, so now we want to show you a quick demo of it working, hopefully. Fingers crossed for a live video demo. Yeah, it's working, thankfully. So you can see the cursor there navigating around the left-hand side, opening up a lot of the roles we had around tech and others. So you'll notice there's a few sections within each role, just adding a bit about the role itself, how to use the actual framework. And then you get into the competencies themselves. You can move the sliders. You can add notes based on your conversation with the manager. There are examples of how you can go about sort of increasing your demonstration of the actual competencies themselves. There are different tabs across the top around behaviors and different specialisms. And you have the ability to apply it or not to your radar. Then you go and save it, and it remembers what you've put in. And then the nicest thing, in my view, is this radar, which then gives you your visual summary of your strengths and then development areas, and allows you to go and build your objectives on the back of this, and then come back to and see where you've improved next time. So the benefits that we found around having a tool like this, as opposed to traditional, more manual versions, as Gareth was mentioning, it's clear, it's all in one place. There's not thousands of different Excel spreadsheets flying around for all the different roles. You can have the version control. Any updates go through the working group and are done right and in a consistent manner. And all the engineering managers and other managers are sort of talking in the same way about how you go and develop yourself and use this tool. So all engineers and other people in tech are getting the same experience. The engagement has really gone up, so we find that sort of having a tool like this to be able to score and save your own assessment of yourself has really picked up sort of engagement around sort of progress and development, and it's much more effective to have that conversation as a manager and as an engineer sort of during those catch-ups. The branded element, we were able to sort of make it look and feel like a lot of the other ASOS websites and systems, which adds more credibility and adds the sort of emphasis that ASOS is actually investing a lot in the learning and the development of their employees. And lastly, the visibility, it just allows everyone to be able to go and access the competencies for their own role and their sort of the career ladder within their own role, but also to go and find out what other roles, either within tech or outside, actually entail. So if you're looking to make more of a sideways move somewhere else, you can go and see what transferable skills you might already have, or what it entails to actually go into a different role and what the opportunities for progression are there.
So just on that last point, the visibility across the whole of ASOS, as a result of that visibility, we ended up working with people in our commercial and product teams. We've ended up working with people in our finance teams. They all wanted to put their competencies into the app, which was really, really great. It meant we could also run those same workshops I spoke about with these individuals to really drive out and understand their competencies. I think it's just nice as a tech, within a wider organization, I think we are massively underutilized in the value that we can bring. We can start working with people within our business and helping them improve, helping them understand tech, but also helping them go about their own day-to-day lives and making it easier for them. For finance, for example, they had a Microsoft form with all of their competencies. You score yourself 1 to 5, you submit your form, and then someone would manually go in, put it into Excel, create that summary chart for you, and then share it with you. In the app, it does it all for you now, so it saves all of that time from the line management perspective. That means that everyone can kind of access it to one tool. The exciting thing is, I'm hoping that other competencies, other areas within the business will reach out and also want to put their competencies in and make it a one-stop shop for everyone who wants to kind of develop and grow their careers within ASOS. So it wasn't all perfect. I think I mentioned it was rushed at first. So we had that local client-side app, which was great. But obviously, as soon as someone wiped the local storage, everyone lost their competency scores. And it really kind of just pushed forward the priority of moving to a server-side app. We still have questions about what it means to be a senior engineer, what it means to be a senior QA, right? So one of the things we're going to start looking at doing, and we've done it in some areas, is start collating all of the scores. So for every senior QA engineer who scored themselves in the app, we can start averaging out those scores and give people an idea of just what it means to be a senior QA and overlay that on the summary chart so they can see areas that they might want to develop in and grow themselves. And then last but not least, I think we've ran some hack days around it. We've had people contribute to it, but it would be great if we had more people contributing to it within ASOS. Like I said, we've got our day jobs. This is something we feel passionate about, so we spend the time doing it. It'd be great if other people could come and join us on that journey.
Yeah, so just to circle back around on this satisfaction survey, we were pleased to see the score go up, not massively. We can't claim it's a massive sort of life-changing increase, but it's going in the right direction, and that's what we're hoping for. But more importantly, sort of a lot more people are using it and using it in the right way, both engineers and managers.
So our next steps, almost like a roadmap, right? So we're going to have something about AI, definitely. Especially after seeing Lena's talk yesterday, there's going to be something about AI in our roadmap. But there's also going to be training materials, right? So you can come in, you can score yourself, you can look at how you're developing and the areas you need to develop. Wouldn't it be great if then you can see how you can go away and kind of learn those skills and develop those skills? I also mentioned the overlay of the role, the levels. That's something we're looking at, something we've got already in some areas, but they're hard-coded values in. We want to start looking across using all this data we have now about the engineers and start averaging out, kind of giving people, bringing it to life almost, and making it visible so people can see the averages for their roles. We've got about 15, 16 different roles within the competency app. There is a lot of duplication across those roles when it comes to things like coaching and mentoring. If I'm coaching and mentoring as a QA engineer, it's going to be largely the same as if I was coaching and mentoring as a software engineer, as a platform engineer. So we need to start bringing all of that duplication together and having a shared understanding of just what it means to do these things. And finally, the first step of open sourcing it is sharing it with all you today, taking you through the journey that we've been, but we also want to open source the app and open source the GitHub repo as well.
Yeah, so revisit the takeaways that we hope we've explained today. And I think it's important to mention that sort of obviously you can do a good amount with just one of these things we talked about, but I think everything sort of works in combination. So these conversations, giving the support for both managers and engineers to actually have that career development chat.
And the growth frameworks, right? So we spoke about the Dreyfus model for development. That works very well for us, but there are many others out there that you can go away and look at. We also spoke about making it role agnostic, making it really focus on the engineers wanting to grow, wanting to develop, and then the promotion will be hopefully be a natural byproduct of that growth and development.
And finally, sort of just the fact that sort of engagement is key. I think sort of we're all tech people here, and obviously a lot of our teams are building fancy solutions all day, every day. So to come back to an Excel spreadsheet for what's really important in their lives, why don't we invest some sort of time and effort in finding a good framework which is interactive and engaging?
Cool. So we set out on this journey to really revolutionize engineer growth, but due to the success of it, I suppose, we've ended up revolutionizing other people's growth at ASOS as well. So thank you very much. And that is our talk.